And we're back, folks, here on the Michigan Insider on Sports Talk 1050, WTKA, online at WTKA.com. You may have heard me say for the past couple of days that a special event is coming to the M-Den right here on campus in a couple of days. Stephanie Steinberg and many of the other former Michigan Daily writers will be at the M-Den at 303 South State Street this Thursday from 6 until 8 p.m. to sign copies of the new book, In the Name of Editorial Freedom, 125 years at the Michigan Daily. Joining us right now to discuss that book, her time at the Daily, the future of the Daily, is former editor-in-chief of the Michigan Daily, Stephanie Steinberg. Stephanie, good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me on today.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. So first, let's just talk about your experience at the Daily. What years were you there?
Sure. I was there 2008 to 2011, and my senior year, as you said, I was editor-in-chief of this massive student newspaper.
Well, so during that time, you obviously, this being a sports show, covered some major occurrences on the sports side of things, from the the academic investigation to the stretching investigation. What do you remember most about those times from a student perspective and covering those stories?
Oh, gosh. I think the one story that sticks out in my mind is the night that Rich Rodriguez was fired. And, this was a big deal. And I remember the sports section was running around like crazy trying to confirm the news, driving back and forth down State Street. And once it happened, we put together this huge issue, talking about his firing and who the new coach could possibly be. And it's kind of ironic because that night at 3 a.m., we actually lost all the pages. I was about to send that to the printer, and computers, things go wrong, and I was about to hit send, and they all just shut down.
Wow.
And that is definitely something I will never forget, because we were scrambling last minute to try and get all the pages back again, and thankfully it all worked out, but that's something that sticks out.
Yeah, you got your taste of how to deal with adversity for sure.
Oh yeah.
You guys, by the time you leave Michigan, you are grizzled veterans in a certain regard when it comes to obviously dealing with a major infrastructure when you're talking about not only the athletic department but also the university president, up there on the Hill. What was that experience like? What kind of interaction during your time there? What kind of coverage were you able to, did you ever feel like it was more difficult for you guys as students to cover be it Michigan or the athletic department than it was for the major newspapers and whatnot?
Yeah, luckily access is pretty standard, I would say, across the board for all sports writers. I think our daily football writers had the same challenges that the Detroit News and Detroit Free Press sports writers had in terms of trying to get exclusive interviews.
Mm-hmm.
I know Ryan Karchi was the managing sports editor during my time there, and he kept always trying to get an exclusive interview with Denard Robinson. And the athletic department would keep turning him down. And this was during, 2010 when Denard was just on the rise. And so Ryan decided, forget this. I'm going to go down to Deerfield Beach, and I'm going to go and interview Denard's family and get some better access and some good stories. And that's what he did, and he actually writes about that in the book.
Wow.
And that story that he covered.
There you go. That's a way to get around it. So what about
Exactly.
this? What about this? What about on the flip side? Were there advantages to being a reporter for the Michigan Daily versus maybe being with the media outside of the university construct?
Oh, absolutely. In terms of the sports side, all the sports writers were in classes with a lot of these college student athletes, and they were going to the same parties and seeing them on the weekend. And, that's not something that a typical reporter from around town is going to be doing. They're not sitting in Kel's class or whatever class it is next to some football players. So, Chantel Jennings, actually, from ESPN, she writes about her time covering the basketball team, and she was in like a 24-person class with like half the players on the basketball team. And so she had, some special access there in terms of just seeing these players every day, and they would get to know her, and there's definitely an advantage to that.
Gotcha. We're talking to Stephanie Steinberg this morning, former editor-in-chief of the Michigan Daily, now at U.S. News and World Report. We'll talk about what you're doing now coming up, Stephanie. But so tell us more in depth about this book, folks. It's called In the Name of Editorial Freedom, 125 Years at the Michigan Daily. Stephanie and some of her former colleagues will be at the M-Den at 303 South State Street this Thursday from 6 until 8 p.m. signing copies of the book. So give us an idea of, and you kind of touched on it already, of what's in the book and what the book supports. So how about that?
Sure. Well, basically the book starts around 1965. I reached out to a lot of notable Daily alumni who went on to have successful careers in journalism. So, think top publications like the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, ESPN, Sports Illustrated, and I asked them to go back to a time and a story that they covered on campus while they were at the Michigan Daily, and basically tell that story in their words, what happened behind the scenes. So these are basically short essays in the book that the alumni wrote, and they span history. So they go back to the March on Selma, to the Vietnam War era, what happened in the Daily on the day of September 11th, and then you have the sports stories too, like what was it like to interview Bo one-on-one in his office after a Rose Bowl loss, or what was it like to talk to Denard Robinson's family. So it's sort of a collection of the biggest moments in history and Michigan campus, but also national news as well.
So what was the inspiration? What made you say, hey, I want to do this?
Well, I started this project about 2 years ago, and, I sort of had it in my mind that, the Daily's turning 125 years in 2 years. We should, do something to commemorate the paper and the 6,000 journalists who worked there. And, I thought getting the stories from the actual alumni and putting it on paper so that there's a record there of history would be a nice way to commemorate the Daily's anniversary. So 2 years later, here we are.
Gotcha. All right. And these days, you're at U.S. News and World Report, and I imagine, and Ira brought this up before he went to the break, I imagine when you run into Michigan people, they're saying, hey, what are you doing over there to make sure Michigan's ranking gets bumped up a bit, right?
Oh, absolutely, all the time. I'm actually friends with the college rankings founder, and he went to Michigan State, actually. But
wow.
I run into him in the elevator. I'm like, okay, so what do we got to do to get Michigan, a little bit better in the rankings this year? And he kind of jokes around with me. But it's well known around the newsroom that I am a diehard Maize and Blue fan.
All right.
Well, about that.
Well, Stephanie, congratulations on this work. Again, folks, it's called In the Name of Editorial Freedom, 125 Years at the Michigan Daily. Stephanie Steinberg and many of her former colleagues, they'll be over at the M-Den in a couple of days, Thursday, 6 until 8 p.m. signing copies of the book, folks. So make it on over. And Stephanie, good luck with it. And thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you so much for having me on.
All right. Thanks a lot. That was Stephanie Steinberg formerly of the Michigan Daily, now of U.S. News and World Report, and the book In the Name of Editorial Freedom, 125 Years at the Michigan Daily. And obviously many of the Daily alums have gone on to great things, and she is but one of them.
Yeah, the list is long of where they are. Obviously U.S. News, but also Sporting News and New York Times and USA Today. And you can go down the list, the Tennessean, the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, obviously our local papers here.
And in this evolving media, the training they get now, I mean, you got to be multifaceted, and they're getting that. They're getting that now because, dude, I mean, everything. You got to be good on camera now.
Well, that's
got to be good on camera.
I went to a symposium years ago, and I think I've talked about this on the air because I've had conversations with guys that work with you and our interns. You're no longer a reporter, or you are a multi-platform content provider. You have to be able to talk. You have to be able to be on camera. You have to be able to shoot video.
You got to be able to edit video.
It would be very helpful if you can edit the video. And then obviously you still have to be able to write.
Mm-hmm.
So you are a multi-platform content provider. And the best ones can do all of that well. And it's not easy to do because they're all very different skills. Talking on camera versus talking on mic. So radio versus TV or podcast versus TV, very different. Obviously writing, very different than the speaking. And if you're writing a magazine versus a newspaper or a gamer or something for an internet site, all very different. So multi-platform content provider, and the Michigan Daily alum, they represent the school very well outside of, say, a few people that worked at the Free Press and now works at Sports Illustrated.
And the paid positions working for an actual company as opposed to yourself, those opportunities aren't necessarily plentiful. I mean, the opportunities that are plentiful are the ones at MarcusRay.com, right? You just make your own, do your own blog.
Yeah, the jobs have definitely they have shrunk, the amount of jobs that are available, especially when you're younger, when you first get out of school. So you see guys and gals like, I'll use Tim Rohan, who did a great job covering Michigan a few years ago. He went right to New York Times. Mm-hmm. Or Nicole Auerbach, who's been on the show a few times. She jumped right to USA Today. That's really tough to do. Mm-hmm. And they're very good at what they do, so they are. And they've always, the Michigan Daily, for the most part, since I've been on the air here and probably longer, but I wasn't really living in town before that, so I didn't read it as much. They have done as good as anybody to get the stories. She talked about the story of going down to Deerfield Beach for the writer and talking to Denard's family. I remember that story. Did a great job. A few years before that, they did a really good pull-out piece on all the kids from Pahokee. And they went down to Pahokee, and they did this very well-written piece on the kids that were from there, what it's like down there, why they came here, all that kind of stuff. Really well done. They do a very good job of coming up with enterprise-type stories. Daily does a really good job.